questions.
Good afternoon. I am really excited by today's news and continuation of a bill that I introduced and became law in 2014. It was one of the first bills that I worked on when I was elected to the City Council, and it was a bill to allow transgender New Yorkers, really any New Yorker, to correct their birth certificate and change the gender marker on their birth certificate. You don't need a doctor to tell you who you are, and you shouldn't need a doctor to change your birth certificate to reflect your true self. This groundbreaking legislation will make New York City birth certificates more inclusive for all and will send a powerful signal to the world that New York City government works for everyone. Now more than ever, it's important for us as elected officials to show our constituents that we see them, we have their backs, and we respect them for who they are. Just a little background for folks that may not know, this new proposal that is coming forward is going to be introduced and worked on at the Board of Health. It's going to be on Tuesday, tomorrow. The Board of Health will consider these rule changes. Also this week on Thursday, the council is introducing a bill by me to do this. It's the same thing we did in 2014. We did dual track Board of Health and City Council. The reason why we did that is because what spurred us to do this in 2014 was that about 7 years before that, there was a proposal at the Board of Health to change birth certificates to do what we ended up accomplishing. But the Board of Health decided to, after doing some outreach, to not move forward with that proposal. And so if a Board of Health, if a mayor changes, if a Board of Health changes, they could relook at policies. The way to strengthen that is to also do it through the City Council, to not just have it be through regulation at the Board of Health, but to have it be put into law through legislation at the City Council. So the same thing we did in 2014 with the Board of Health acting on it and the Council acting on it, we're doing it the same way this go around. The language is going to be exactly the same in the Board of Health and the legislation, so there'll be no changes there. And this new proposal, people who born in New York City who do not identify their gender as either male or female would have the option of choosing a third category for their birth certificates under this new proposal. It would be just an X, kind of an other. And there are plenty of New Yorkers who don't identify with either sex or gender, and so it would give them that opportunity. This opportunity, I believe, already exists for parents when their baby is born. When they are filling out the birth certificate, they can choose either male, female, or X, another category, undefined. And so this would allow folks who didn't have that opportunity or whose parents did not choose that third option to go back and correct their birth certificates. I want to tell you that I'm proud of a lot of things I've done in the last 5 years, but one of the things that I'm most proud of is actually this piece of legislation that I passed. It was very moving and meaningful. And between January of 2015, when it went into effect, to March of last year, 2017, 731 New Yorkers went and got their birth certificates changed and corrected them in a way that matched how they feel about themselves. The age of applicants ranged from 5 years old to 76 years old, and 41 individuals were under the age of 18 and received parental consent to make those changes. So advocates are currently fighting to ensure that non-binary individuals can identify as such on passports. And until that option is available for all forms of ID, we know that individuals, if needed, may utilize original birth certificates as proof of ID when applying for a passport or a driver's license. And so this is an important step for those folks. For people that don't know, non-binary gender identity is a gender identity that doesn't fall within the typical binary gender system. that means a man or a woman. So while most people, including most transgender people, identify as either male or female, non-binary individuals do not identify as either one of those things. For example, some individuals are intersex, meaning they have anatomy or genes that don't fit typical definitions of male or female, and that is why I want to give them this third option. So this is an expansion on the bill we passed in 2014. I am really proud of this bill. I'm proud we're going even further to help more people and to continue to help people self-identify in a way that's meaningful to them. So I'm happy to take any questions on this, and I'm happy to talk about anything else. Aaron.
Why X? Is that particular significance as opposed to saying other or non-binary or whatever the case may be?
To me, it doesn't have any particular significance. I don't know why the health department chose that. I think that was what was already in place for babies, for their parents. I think X really doesn't have a special connotation. I just think it's a way to mark other.
Okay, and so the way it works now and the way it's going to work, so you'll be able to, as an adult, say, I want to change my gender. You can do from male to female, from female to male, which already can, or you can change it to X. But then, as far as for parents with their babies, can any parent currently choose that option? Or
Yes.
is it only for, okay. So
Any parent, so if you have a baby right now in New York City, when you're at the hospital and you're filling out the birth certificate, there are three options: male, female, or X, the other option.
and it doesn't require like a medical condition?
No,
Okay.
it does not.
So if you want to go the other way, if your parent makes you an X and you want to become female or whatever, you can change it that way too?
Exactly. So you get to go correct your birth certificate in any way that you like. And one of the things that in 2014, when we passed the legislation to correct the gender marker to be, I believe, either male or female. I don't think we gave people then that opportunity to do X. Is that correct, Jen?
So the way it is now with babies, it's actually asterisk, it's 4 asterisks.
Oh,
It means the same thing.
it's 4 asterisks.
Instead of X. Babies right now, it's 4 asterisks. It will remain that way.
Okay.
Adults are X.
So do you have to be a certain age to make the change? Like you have to be 18 and over, or
You-
what if you're 12 and you say?
You need parental consent if you're under 18 years old.
Now, does this have ramifications down the road for any other kind of identification? You know, say you have to supply your birth certificate for a social security card or anything like that. So how does?
I mean, this is the tricky thing. You know, under the Obama administration, there were strides that were made for transgender Americans on some of these important documents. We've seen a rollback of many of those rights under this current administration. And so what we want to do is, if you live in New York City, ensure that you have documents that accurately reflect who you are. If you're someone who's going for a home loan, or to fill out your college application, or even if you're just going to get into a restaurant or a bar and you show your ID and your ID says that you're a male, but you identify as a female, you appear, someone would perceive you to be a female, there then becomes problems because someone's looking at your license saying, what is this, a fake ID? You know what, you're trying to mislead us? And it creates these really bad situations for people who are not able to end up getting ID that matches actually who they are. So this would, it's a continuation of trying to get people ID that actually matches how they feel about themselves, and in some instances, how they outwardly appear to the world to actually match in that way, so there's less confrontation and also affirms people's self-identity. Rich?
I just had clarity on Aaron's earlier question.
Yeah.
So you're saying that a parent of a newborn can choose the X for the newborn, it would be the asterisk?
It's the same thing.
No, I want to make sure we're accurate.
Yeah, so I don't know why the health department did this, but the way they implemented it, for adults, it's just an X, which means other. For babies, the category is other, but it's 4 asterisks. I don't know why they chose to do it that way, but that's the way that it's done. But it means the same thing. It's basically not identifying as either male or female. It's identifying in a non-binary way.
Right, okay, all right, got you. That makes sense.
I don't understand it either.
It's a little confusing, but, you know.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
You were saying on the Board of Health will consider these changes tomorrow, and then the full council on, so is this not a done deal yet? It is, it's done, or?
No, I mean, this is something I support, and it's something that the mayor has announced, so I assume that The Board of Health, led by Dr. Bassett, is likely going to approve these things. It will go through a process. This won't get finalized with the Board of Health until later this year. There's a process. This is the first phase of the process, so it's the introduction of the change at the Board of Health. And then there'll be a public comment period. Then in the fall or the end of the summer, there'll be a vote. So there's a strict process with the Board of Health. With us, it will be introduced this week into the council. Then it will go through the committee hearing process. And on all these things, there could be changes. We'll listen to advocates. We'll talk to the administration. And eventually we'll come up with something that matches the Board of Health. And we'll work, our legislative team will work with the Board of Health to make sure that they do match.
It's just being introduced on Thursday.
Just being introduced. Yeah, David?
I was going to say on the X versus asterisk thing, isn't the difference between parents saying we're not going to define the child versus people, an adult or someone who's got parental permission, coming in and saying affirmatively, I want to identify in this way. And so for the health department, you'd actually have data that would say X number of New Yorkers have defined themselves this way versus X number of parents.
Yeah, I think asterisk is a little bit more of like a placeholder. You know, it could be until that baby who becomes a young adult or an adult decides that they want to be the other category, or they want to themselves decide if they identify as male or female. I think the X category for an adult is an adult saying we are something different than male or female.
And then I'm just theorizing, we're talking about it in the line before, but maybe it's only X because they took off the Y or the second X on, you know.
On the chromosomal chart? Could be.
Yeah.
I wasn't told that.
So how does somebody who identifies as X, they have an application for whatever, a job or a loan, and there's no option for that, what does that person do?
I mean, that's one of the things that I think gender nonconforming New Yorkers run into all the time, is they're put in this position where they're given an application, a document that they have to fill out, and the options for gender or sex, there's not an option that they can check off that they feel like accurately describes who they are. And that is why we, hopefully, the city government doing this, will actually be leading the charge and showing other corporations and universities and other places in government, whether it be the state government or other places, that this should be something that they should do as well. And there's nothing wrong with this. But Juliet, the point that you just named, I think is a good one, which is we're getting, at least when it comes to birth certificates, we're getting rid of that issue that currently exists, which is some people don't want to check off male or female. And this is going to give them that third option. Yes, sir.
Same thing kind of like towards passports, like how do people get federal documents if this is a city law? How does that happen?
I mean, when we initially worked on this bill, and Louis, feel free to jump in from my office, or Tirza, when we worked on this in 2014, we had a long conversation with the State Department. They actually came up to New York. They flew up here when we were introducing the bill and negotiating the bill, because the Health Department flagged some concerns that they thought would raise issues with the State Department on passports and other documents. And the bill that we passed in 2014 was a bill that the State Department and the federal government didn't think was going to interfere or cause any problems as it related to federal documents. I assume, though I haven't been told this yet, I assume similar conversations have happened with the federal government in this instance as well, and we believe that this is not going to create, the last thing we want to do is create any additional problems for anyone. We're doing this to actually help people in a meaningful way, and we think that it will actually help folks in that aspect. Aaron?
So you're changing, in addition to the X category, you're removing the requirement that a medical professional.
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, that part itself is a relatively new development, right? So at the time, you guys thought it was appropriate to require an affidavit from a medical professional. And I guess what has changed in your thinking as far as wanting to remove that requirement?
This is me being maybe too candid. I never wanted to include that. 4 years ago. That was in the bill. Every bill we do gets negotiated in some way. I never thought that we should require a doctor to tell you it's okay to identify in this way. But for a variety of reasons, that ended up in the bill because other folks involved thought that was important. I, at the time, behind the scenes, fought very, right, Louis? Fought very strenuously against including that in there. So I'm actually very happy about this change, because again, I don't think a doctor needs to tell you how you identify or sign off on that. And in some ways, I think it continues. One of the reasons why I really opposed that at the time was because for many transgender people, the requirement was going to mean that they were going to have to go have a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a social worker tell them that the way they're identifying made sense and gave them a doctor's note. And in some way that makes it seem like there's something wrong with people who want to change their gender. And I don't want to make it seem like you're sick in some way. You need to go get permission from a medical professional. So that is a big change. It's a change that I wish was included in the original bill about 4 years ago. And so I'm really happy to see this change today.
Any off topic?
Let me go to Rich first. Yeah.
Was there one story, a person, or something that made you such a strong advocate of this? What made you understand this issue so well and to be such an advocate for it?
I mean, I have a bunch of transgender friends and people that I had worked with in politics and in activism before I ran for office, you know, transgender activists. And I remember really distinctly that in 2002, when the state of New York, under then Governor Pataki, passed what was called SONDA, the Sexual Orientation Non-Discrimination Act, gender identity and expression were supposed to be included in that bill. And it was then Majority Leader Joe Bruno and Assembly Speaker Silver to compromise to get it through a Republican Senate and signed by Governor Pataki. Transgender people were removed from that bill. Jen, I'm getting the chills talking about it because it's so upsetting. They were removed from that bill. And they were told, we'll come back next year and we'll fix it, but we can't do it this year. That was in 2002. It's 16 years later, and we have never fixed that. And so for me, when I came in, I remember like being part of that process and feeling really horrible about transgender people being thrown to the side as part of a deal to gain rights for someone like me, a gay man, that we had to lose transgender protections to make that happen. And when I became health chair, I thought, like, what can we do in the city council to further protect transgender New Yorkers and to give them the dignity that they deserve? And one of the most basic ways of doing that is through getting an accurate birth certificate. And when I started to meet with advocates, who, especially legal service organizations that protect transgender New Yorkers from cases of discrimination, or getting documents that match who they are, clients talked over and over again about not just the issues that they faced every day and trying to get accurate identification, but having an inaccurate birth certificate, but then also having to look at a birth certificate that they didn't feel like actually reflected who they were and what that meant to them and how hard that was. So for me, it was kind of a combination of just my own personal relationship, having friendships with transgender people, and the lessons that I learned from being part of that really upsetting political battle and wrong that was committed in 2002 that we've never corrected.
I'm sorry, when all is said and done down the road, they could vote as early as the council, as early as?
The council could probably vote. I would assume that the council and the Board of Health will not finalize this until September or October. I'm guessing at the earliest date, but it will probably be by the end of the year. But I think September, October is the earliest time that it would make it through the legislative process and through the Board of Health mandated process.
Just to clarify, if the legislation you proposed in 2014, it went through and you currently do need a doctor to sign off.
Yes.
And then this new part is.
You don't need a doctor. You can just go to the Board of Health, vital records, and you can get a change without a doctor's note, without a note from a social worker, a psychiatrist, or a psychologist, and you can do it on your own without having to make an appointment and get a note to bring with you to the Vital Records Department at the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Okay, off topic. David.
All right, so right now the mayor's and the law department and others are finalizing a deal, settlement agreement with the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan over their sort of needs for repairs in NYCHA, and it looks like from the contract we understand now about $1 billion over 4 years that the mayor is committing to pay into NYCHA. Do you agree with this, that the mayor has, essentially committed the city to this spending outside of the normal budgetary process? I know some of your colleagues disagree with that.
First of all, there was a great piece that you wrote about the history of public housing in New York City. I feel slightly conflicted. The council put in its budget response about $2.5 billion that we thought should go through NYCHA directly through the city appropriating it on its own. And in our budget response, we included money for heat and hot water,